Welcome to another edition of Chicago Crossing Model Railroad at the Bench. It's me, Eric, here with you with a couple of switch machines. And these are switch machines that will be going onto my layout. I've already got this one labeled with its address. These are DCC decoder containing switch machines, both of them actually. So for me, this should be a straightforward sort of install, at least as straightforward as installing switch machines ever really is. And the way I kind of look at it, well, if it throws the switch, I think I'll be pretty happy. But anyway, to tell you what I've got here, I've got two different switch machines. Both of these are made by MTB. These are made in Europe. You can go to MTB-model.com. They're sold in the United States as well through Model Railroad Control Systems. They're out in California, I believe. And they have a video that goes through a review. You can also see reviews of these on Chadwick Model Railway, at least the analog versions. The versions I have, I've got two specific ones. One is called a DP4, and then one is called a DP10. Both of these for DP means that they are basically DCC encoder enabled, so they contain a DCC encoder inside. The DP10 is largely based on the idea that it is the same footprint as a Circuitron tortoise machine, which you can basically see here. It even matches one-to-one where the ears have notches in them for accepting screws for mounting. The DP4 is basically the same machine, same guts inside, smaller package basically. The reason I actually have both of these is simply based on availability, and because I've got areas with sufficient room on my layout and there are more of these currently available in the US, I got these. There are only a couple of these hanging around, so I got them for the tightest spaces that I have. So aside from that, essentially what you can see is it's just a linear motor that moves back and forth this way with a cam on the interior. We'll open these up and you can take a look at it. And then it has a multi-pin insert into the electronics board, and it comes with one of these little terminals that you can place into there so you can wire it independently and then just connect it with a quick release. So that's actually a pretty nice feature. So again, the DP10 is more or less the same thing. They actually have essentially the same amount of travel here, and that travel is adjustable with a couple of pins that you can change out on the cam. I'll go into some detail about that because there really isn't a lot of detail about that issue on the internet currently. Again, my goal here is not really to, have a review or buy or not buy. I literally have bought, 7 of these and 2 of these, so I've already been sold on the idea just based on the size. All right, so on the DP10 there are 2 screws and then there are some latches in the back. If you open this up and pull out the latches, you basically get the interior of the thing, and this component here comes off. That's what actually will hold the metal wire that moves to the switch. And so here you can essentially see what is inside of this device. It is exceedingly simplistic. You have a circuit board that contains the DCC decoder. It also contains switching in here for LEDs if you want to run a signal off of this, as well as if you want to run an electrified frog off of this. That's not relevant to me. My frogs are insulated frogs. You have 4 different locations where you can place this cam pin that you can see off to the side here. Now, it may look at first blush as if this is a symmetrical round gear. It is actually not. And so what you're looking at here are on this side, you are looking at a 12 millimeter and a 6 millimeter throw. And on this side, that pin is for 3mm, which is probably much more amenable for N scale, and 9mm on the outside. So those pins basically interact with this little component here, and so that will move it back and forth the specified amount based on the location on that gear. So that's basically what the interior of the DP10 looks like. The DP4, as you'll see, is more or less identical, and really the only difference is that in this case, this component here is simply not enclosed in the plastic shell. But as you will see, everything else is basically identical. Anyway, if we just go ahead and lift the base off of here, once again, other than the color of the plastic being yellow, you can see this is essentially the same stuff inside. A very small, probably coreless motor. You have the cam shaft here, which is rotated by a gear down there. Now, if we want to actually change the degree to which this will throw the switch, basically what you do is you literally just pull that pin out and you shift it over, and that's basically it. So now it will actuate that switch at a 3mm distance rather than a 6. So just a couple of other notes about these switch machines. Number one is they accept a metal pin, and they come with these metal pins here, which are, you know, quite thick. I suppose you can see them here. That's like a decent gauge of wire, not really bendable. The recommendation that comes from model railroad control systems is to use music wire instead, and this is the specific music wire that they recommend. So this is 0.032 or 0.18 millimeters, so 32 thou or 80 or 0.81 millimeters music wire. That's number 5501. And basically that music wire, you know, initially you look at it, you're like, oh, that must be the same thing. But it's actually not. It's flexible. And where this comes into play is basically like any switch machine, there's going to be some slop in terms of how you install it. And so this at least allows you to get some bending rather than, you know, having a hard stop with a thick piece of metal hitting the edge of the hole if there's still a little bit of travel in the motor or something like that. The other element of it is that you can adjust the more or less the start-stop point, or at least the placement of that peg in two ways. Number one is, first off, you have two different holes over here. You can actually unscrew this portion here, which is a little tough with a jeweler's screwdriver. I've got another screwdriver which is not terribly ideal for that, but will do the job. There we go. And so this will actually pop open a little bit. And you notice you've got essentially like a thicker and a thinner end. You can take this thing off and reverse it depending on whether or not you might need that. So that's one element of it. The other element is that you can also loosen these screws here, and that gives you the ability to basically slide this component to one side or the other. This is not the part of the motor that travels. That's actually this wider yellow thing here. But again, it lets you just kind of, you know, accommodate a little bit of the slop that happens in installing these motors. All right, welcome back to the layout. The turnout motors have all been installed. I'll save that particular aspect for another video, simply so that we don't run too long form here. But simply wanted to give you a demonstration of these turnout motors. Now, these particular turnout motors here are also linked to the signals that you see here. So when they are in the thrown position, meaning that a locomotive cannot run straight through, those signals will turn red. Right now they are green. These signals, by the way, are powered by a non-switched bus, meaning that anytime the layout is turned on from the rack mount power supply, these signals and anything else running off of that bus will be powered. So if I go ahead and throw this particular turnout, you can get a sense of what happens. So you basically get the internal switch on the motor that will switch to the red LED. And in general, you know, that's about as smooth as you're going to get for a tiny little N-scale switch like this, where it just kind of snaps in between positions, certainly a little bit quieter than when it was hooked up to those Pico motors and would just basically slap against the other rail. Here it's a little bit more subtle. Now I'm going to switch the microphone off of my lavalier to the room microphone, and you can get a better sense of the sound that these make. These are not particularly quiet. You hear that sort of high-pitched whining sound as the motor turns its gears and turns the cam and throws the switch. And you can, of course, hear a little bit of a snap back and forth. To me, that's not the worst thing, because I would much rather have the switch fully thrown than just sort of resting in a partial position. However, I think the bottom line is these are not super quiet. One last test we can do is we can actually turn on one of my Broadway Limited Loco's sound, and you can see what it sounds like when there's actually a sound-enabled locomotive running around the track. So let's do that real quick. What's the bottom line here? Well, what I did is I installed, thankfully, very compact but rather noisy switch motors onto the layout. Am I pleased with the result? I'd say overall, yes, simply because there were certain areas on this layout where a tortoise would be entirely impractical. Actually, multiple areas where a tortoise would not be practical. And so if I'm going to have a switch motor, something needs to be there that is sufficiently compact. When there's a locomotive running, or two locomotives running sound, it's a little less noticeable. Different copies of different motors sound a little bit different, but all of them are certainly a little bit of a high-pitched whine. So that's kind of where I'm going to leave it. I will say you can make up your own mind based on the considerations that go into your own layout. Since I don't have a head-to-head comparison with my tortoise motor, I can't really give you a head-to-head comparison about sound. I can simply show you what it is that I hear and let you best make up your mind as to what might work if you have particularly small or compact areas on your layout. All right. Next installment of this, we'll take a look at literally installing these things and see what went into it. And in particular, I will share with you some areas that were particularly challenging to actually get switch motors into. So until then, have a good Sunday and a good start to your November.